American Sports Cavalcade. A panorama of speed, color, drama, and excitement. The American Sports Cavalcade.
I'm Steve Evans. What you have just seen is one of the most spectacular drag racing incidents in recent memory. It was R.C. Sherman living one of the most frightening experiences that a funny car driver can have. A car completely and totally out of control. As always, the NHRA safety safari was on the scene immediately. The jaws of life had cut away the roll cage. The NHRA emergency team administered treatment to an alert but visibly shaken R.C. Sherman. Sherman was carefully moved to the waiting ambulance and on to the hospital for x-rays. Happily, aside from bruises and a sprained hand, he was all right. The same, though, could not be said for the race car. It was a total loss. In replay, we see R.C. Sherman of Maryland in the near lane. This was qualifying for the Citgo Cajun Nationals in Baton Rouge here at State Capitol Dragway. Sherman's car slowly veered to the right, out of the racing lane, into the marbles, the loose rubber. There it lost traction. It headed to the left. Sherman trying to regain control, but it is not to be. He appears to have come very close to the wall, maybe have brushed it. Suddenly a right turn, throttle wide open into the rail. The body exits the machine, the parachute lines acting like an umbilical cord to the chassis as Sherman tumbles down the racetrack. From yet another angle, R.C. Sherman on the right side of your screen. Losing traction, billowing tire smoke, trying to control the car right there. The body touches the guardrail. It shifts and holds the throttle wide open.
Well, the car left the line and it felt like it was on a pretty good run, and then it went right a little bit, and then I remember it smoking the tires. And when it smoked the tires, it got a little crooked toward the left guardrail, and I lifted, and when I lifted, it was like I didn't lift. It might have come back to half throttle, or it might have stuck at full throttle. I can't really remember. I went into the left guardrail at a pretty shallow angle, and I was trying to steer it down the racetrack because I figured if I can just keep it in the racetrack, I can do something to get it stopped. But I couldn't keep the car out of the left guardrail. And then once it hit the left guardrail, then it was out of control. And I remembered, the last thing I remember was seeing the right guardrail coming. When I look out of the windshield, I saw the right guardrail coming straight at me, and I knew I was flying. And I said, this isn't going to be pretty. And then I don't remember a thing after that until they were trying to get me out of the car.
Whoa. After seeing that with R.C. Sherman, it's time to sit down in the air conditioning and take a deep breath. And no better place to do that than in this incredible lounge built into the front of the #1 Funny Car Qualifiers trailer down the Snake Prud'homme. Now, most of the drivers, the full-time pros anyway, consider this kind of a facility now to be a necessity, not a luxury. And I might add that their wives agree. But a lot of the old hardline mechanics, they consider these kind of a nuisance. You know what I mean? A guy like Austin Coyle, crew chief for John Brute Force. In fact, Paul Page is over at John Force's trailer to show us the business end where Austin lives and works.
Well, Steve, by contrast, the truck used by John Force, his crew chief Austin Coyle and the team, about 15 years old, doesn't have any plush carpeting, there's no wood panel on the walls. This baby is made for business. Now, of course, the funny car fits in the back end, but up here in the front section is all the equipment you could ever possibly want. Your parts washer. Down underneath here is your welding equipment. Spare motors are stacked underneath the workbench. Grinding equipment galore. As a matter of fact, if you want your valves ground, well, that can be done right here. A bandsaw, a high-tech contribution, the computer. This is where the data is taken out of the car, displayed up here, and Austin Coyle can decide what changes he may want on the next run. In short, anything that you may want to do to a race car can be done right here. Steve?
Well, I have been ousted from my air-conditioned refuge here because Don Perdoman crew have had to take their funny car to the staging lanes for round number 2. Now, when they get there, as you know, Paul, they will not find John Force because all of Austin Coyle's work was for naught in the back of that trailer. It was John Force smoking the tires earlier today in round number 1 against Mark Oswald. Oswald has advanced. Right now, let's go to Big Daddy Don Garlits on the starting line and see how he sees the day.
Steve, it's hot today. The temperature is in the mid-90s, headed for 100 degrees. And besides that, it's very humid, a condition that makes it very difficult for these teams to make horsepower. Add that to the fact that this sun baking down on this racing surface, it's sticky, but it does not have the ability to keep the tire from spinning. So the teams, some of the better ones, have misjudged this racing surface and caused the tires to lose traction. And as the insiders would say, the cars have went up in smoke. The race today is going to be won over there in the pits by the crew chief and the crews, and how they set the tricky clutch, that dual stage clutch that comes in at different points down the racetrack, and whether or not it's going to gain traction or lose traction. And it's going to be very difficult to deal with this hot racing surface.
Well, thank you, Big Daddy, and we are ready to run at the Cajun Nationals from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We pick up in Top Fuel, round number 2, as Dennis Forcell is ready to take on Darrell Gwynn.
The Citgo Cajun Nationals is the 6th stop on the 19-race NHRA Winston Drag Racing Series Tour, and Darrell Gwynn has notched one of those victories. The Gator Nationals in March down in Florida. Dennis Forcell, accomplishing the burnout here, is still looking for victory lane.
Well, you know, Steve, Darrell almost didn't get into this show. It wasn't until the final qualifying session Saturday night that he made the show, but he did get into the top half of the field, so he does have lane choice this morning.
And lane choice on a racetrack like this, as Big Daddy said earlier, with the heat and the humidity, conditions can be ever-changing. It's something you'd always like to have in your pocket if you possibly can. Dennis Forcell, a businessman racer from Minneapolis, Minnesota, was a standout in the sportsman category of top alcohol dragsters for years. His crew chief is Larry Frazier, and periodically throughout the show, we'll be chatting with the crew chiefs right on the starting line. Darrell Gwynn from Miami, Florida, 27 years of age, a full-time pro, a bright young man, with a new crew chief this year, Ken Vinny. They qualified number 8, as Don said, but barely on that last shot did they do it.
And Darrell Gwynn is currently 2nd in the point standing for Top Fuel, behind Gary Ormsby, the current points leader. And Darrell Gwynn is also the defending champion here at the Cajuns.
That's right, Paul. In fact, he pulled off a hat trick last year, winning 3 in a row, and one of them was right here. There is Larry Frazier, crew chief for Dennis Forcell, leaning in. Don, what's he doing?
He's looking in there, going to turn on that switch that starts the computer running. Just as Dennis will stage in the first beam, he will turn the switch on and step back out of the way.
They're ready. Green light. An incredible drag race. And the winner is Darrell Gwynn at 5:23 to Dennis Forcell's quicker 5.22. Down on the starting line with the winning chief mechanic is Big Daddy Don Garlits. Don?
Didn't do quite as well as we thought. We wanted to run about a 20. But it's just so hot that we just touched a little bit. We didn't want to mess up. We knew he could run good. We stepped on just a little bit, but not quite enough. We're plenty happy to win. Our boy did a good job. He left on him, and that's perfect.
Good luck.
Well, the difference really occurred back at the starting line. Gwynn got away just a little bit quicker, and it paid off down at the far end. Let's take a look at it one more time, Don Garlits.
Note that Darrell's car moves first, just ever so slightly, but it was just what he needed because Forcell made the better run with the 5:22. But it's who leads that line first usually in drag racing. It's so close today. Notice how tight the cars are together as they come down the racetrack. Forcell actually gains back a little bit with his 274 charge, but it wasn't enough.
So Darrell Gwynn picks up the win in round number 2. Let's go to the far end and Steve.
Well, this win will be especially sweet for Darrell Gwynn because, Darrell, you helped a lot behind the steering wheel. Your 5:23 beat Dennis's 5:22.
Well, I'll tell you, I knew Dennis was going to be right there. He's a heck of a racer, and I owed him one here in Baton Rouge, even though we've beat him 5 or 6 times since he's been racing. I was really worried about him. He's a heck of a competitor, and I was really worried about him beating me.
Could you see him coming into that last timing trap?
The entire way I saw him, Steve. Inches. I just inched him out about half track on.
Even though you're going 270, 280 miles an hour, when you're that close to another car, does it almost seem slow motion?
Well, it does, you know, because you're kind of looking over at the other car, and the other car's going the same speed as you. Yeah. But, you know, we ain't got time to be waving to the girls. We're just concentrating on driving these cars.
Okay, well, 2 more rounds, and you can wave to the girls.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, Darrell Gwynn advances with a very close decision over Dennis Forcell. In the meantime, back up at the staging lanes, here comes Dick LaHaye, but he is late in his attempt to take out Frank Bradley. Bradley, you can see, already strapped into the car. And when you look at LaHaye's car, they're still working on the clutch. We'll be back with that run from the Cajun Nationals right after this.